It's time for us to begin. We encourage you to come on in, find a seat. Time to begin class. We've been studying the book of Judges, as you know, in this quarter. And today we're going to look at the 20th and 21st chapters, which will finish the book of Judges. As we know, in the book of Judges, our judges were generals that God put in place to bring His people back out of different servitudes. 6 different servitudes that they were in. This last one that they were in were the Philistine servitude, which we saw the last judge in the book of Judges handling the Philistines, beginning to bring back out from the Philistines. But the people of Israel didn't get out of the Philistine servitude until King David finally ended that servitude. The last few chapters of the book of Judges are really not about judges. But since we're studying the book of Judges, we're going to look at this. This 20th and 21st chapter go along with the 19th chapter, which we looked at last week, in which we saw a Levite take his wife into a town. And they were sitting in the marketplace or in the square, and a local came and got them and took them to his house to spend the night so they wouldn't be spending the night in the square. The local was concerned about the safety of the square. So as they were in his home, the men of the town came over and wanted the husband to come out so they could know him. That means have sexual relations with him. The man said, "No, take my daughter instead." Kind of sounds like Lot, doesn't it? Take my daughters instead. And the men said, "We don't want your daughters, we want the man." Well, the man sent his wife out. That's very interesting. Anyway, the men of the town knew and ravaged his wife and basically killed her. He found her the next morning at the doorstep. He took her in. And she was dead. He cut her up into 12 pieces and sent a piece of each of her out to the 12 tribes of Israel that were scattered through the land. How he did all that, I don't know. He didn't have FedEx or UPS to call and come by and pick up these 12 things and deliver them. But somehow he got these delivered. Well, this really incensed Israel, and that's where we pick the story up here in the 20th chapter. And what we're going to do, it's a long reading, but we're going to read this whole story, 20 and 21, as a story. So I hope you brought your Bible, because trying to follow it verbally may be a little difficult. We're not used today to listening to verbal communication, so it may be a little difficult, but I think we're going to do that, and then we're going to come back and talk about the story. But I want you to hear the story as God had it written down, beginning in the 20th chapter. Then all the people of Israel came out. This is after they had received these 12 pieces. All the people of Israel came out from Dan to Beersheba, including the land of Gilead, and the congregation assembled as one man to the Lord at Mizpah. And the chiefs of all the people of the tribes of Israel presented themselves in the assembly of the people of God, 400,000 men on foot that drew the sword. Now the Benjamites heard that the people of Israel had gone up to Mizpah. Remember, the Benjamites, that's where all of this took place with killing of the woman, was in the land of Benjamin. And the people of Israel said, "Tell us, how was this wickedness brought to pass?" And the Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered, answered and said, "I came to Gibeah, that belongs to Benjamin, I and my concubine, to spend the night. And the men of Gibeah rose against me and beset the house around me by night. They meant to kill me, and they ravaged my concubine, and she is dead. And I took my concubine and cut her in pieces, and sent her throughout the country to the inheritance of Israel, for they have committed abomination and wantonness in Israel. Behold, you people of Israel, all of you, give your advice and counsel here." And all of the people arose as one man, saying, "We will not any of us go to our tent, and none of us will return to his house. But now this is what we will do to Gibeah, and we will go up against it by lot, and we will take 10 men of 100 throughout all the tribes of Israel, and 100 of 1,000, and 1,000 of 10,000, to bring provisions for the people, that when they come they may requite Gibeah of Benjamin for all of the wanton crime which they have committed in Israel, so that all of the men of Israel gathered against the city, united as one man. And the tribes of Israel sent men throughout all the tribes of Benjamin, saying, What wickedness is this that has taken place among you? Now therefore give up the man, the base fellows of Gibeah, that we may put them to death, and put away evil from Israel. But the Benjaminites would not listen to the voice of their brethren, the people of Israel. And the Benjaminites came out together as the city of Gibeah to go out for battle against the people of Israel. And the Benjaminites mustered out of their cities, and on that day 26,000 men that drew the sword, besides the inhabitants of Gibeah, who brought 700 picked men. Among all of these were 700 picked men who were left-handed. Every one could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. And the men of Israel, apart from Benjamin, mustered 400,000 men that drew the sword, and all of these were men of war. The people of Israel arose and went up to Bethel, and inquired of God, which of us shall go up first to battle against the Benjaminites? And the Lord said, Judah shall go up first. Then the people of Israel rose in the morning and encamped against Gibeah. And the men of Israel went out to battle against the Benjaminites, and the men of Israel drew up to the battle line against them at Gibeah. The Benjaminites came out of Gibeah and fell to the ground on that day 22,000 men of the Israelites. But the people, the men of Israel, took courage and again formed the battle line in the same place where they had formed it on the first day. And the people of Israel went up and wept before the Lord until the evening. And they inquired of the Lord, Shall we again draw men into battle against our brethren, the Benjaminites? And the Lord said, Go up against them. So the people of Israel came near to the Benjaminites on the second day, and Benjamin went out against them out of Gibeah the second day, and felled into the ground 18,000 men of the people of Israel. All of these were men who drew the sword. Then all of the people of Israel, the whole army, went up and came to Bethel and wept. They sat there before the Lord and fasted that day until evening, and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. And the people of Israel inquired of the Lord, for the ark of the covenant of God was there in those days, and Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, ministered before it in those days, saying, Shall we yet again go out of the battle against the brethren of Benjaminites, or shall we cease? And the Lord said, Go up, for tomorrow I will give them into your hand. So Israel set men in ambush round about Gibeah. And the people of Israel went up against the Benjaminites on the third day and set themselves in array around Gibeah as other times. And the Benjaminites went out against the people and were drawn away from the city, as at other times they began to smite and kill some of the people in the highways, one of which goes up to Bethel, the other to Gibeah, and the open country, about 30 men of Israel. And the Benjaminites said, "They are routed before us as at first." But the men of Israel said, "Let us flee, draw them away from the city to the highways." And all the men of Israel rose up out of their place and set themselves in array at Balatamar. And the men of Israel who were in ambush rushed out of their place west of Jeba, and there came against Gibeah 10,000 picked men out of all Israel, and the battle was hard. But the Benjaminites did not know the disaster was close upon them. And the Lord defeated Benjamin before Israel. And the men of Israel destroyed 25,100 men of Benjamin that day. All these were men who drew the sword. So the Benjaminites saw that they were defeated. The men of Israel gave ground to Benjamin because they trusted to the men in ambush whom they had sent against Gibeah. And the men in ambush made haste and rushed upon Gibeah. The men in ambush moved out and smote all of the city with the edge of the sword. Now the appointed signal between the men of Israel and the men in ambush was that when they made a great cloud of smoke rise up out of the city, the men of Israel should turn in battle. Now Benjamin had begun to smite and kill about 30 men of Israel, and said, "Surely they are smitten down before us as in the first battle." But when the signal began to rise out of the city in a column of smoke, the Benjaminites looked behind them, and behold, the whole of the city went up in smoke to heaven. Then the men of Israel turned, and the men of Benjamin were dismayed, for they saw that disaster was close upon them. Therefore they turned their backs before the men of Israel in the direction of the wilderness, but the battle overtook them. And those who came out of the cities destroyed them in the midst of them. Cutting down the Benjaminites, they pursued them and trod them down from a couple of different places. 15,000 men of Benjamin, 18,000 men of Benjamin fell, all the men of valor. And they turned and fled toward the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon. 5,000 men of them were cut down in the highways, and they were pursued hard to Gidon, and 2,000 of them were slain. So all who fell that day of Benjamin were 25,000 men that drew the sword, all of them men of valor. But 600 men turned and fled into the wilderness toward the rock of Rimmon. And they abode at the rock of Rimmon 4 months. And the men of Israel turned back against the Benjaminites and smote them with the edge of the sword, and the beast, and all that they found, and all the towns which they found, they set on fire. Now the men of Israel had sworn at Mizpah, "No one shall give us his daughter in marriage to Benjamin." And the people came to Bethel and sat there until evening before God, and they lifted up their voices, wept bitterly. And they said, "O Lord, O God of Israel, why has this come to pass in Israel, that there should be today one tribe lacking in Israel?" And on the morrow the people rose early, built there an altar, and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. And the people of Israel said, "Which of all the tribes of Israel did not come up in the assembly of the Lord?" For they had taken a great oath concerning him who did not come up to the Lord in Mizpah, saying, "He shall be put to death." And the people of Israel had compassion for Benjamin their brethren, said, "One tribe is cut off from Israel this day. What shall we do for wives for those who are left? Since we have sworn by the Lord that we will not give them any of our daughters for wives." And they said, "What one is there of tribes of Israel that did not come up to the Lord at Mizpah?" And behold, no one had come up to the camp from Jabesh Gilead to the assembly. For when the people were mustered, behold, not one of the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead was there. So the congregation sent thither 12,000 of their bravest men and commanded them, "Go and smite the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead with the edge of the sword, also the women and the little ones. This is what you shall do: every male and every woman that has lain with a male you shall utterly destroy." And they found among the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead 400 young virgins who had not known a man lying with him, and they brought them to the camp of Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan. Then the whole congregation sent word to the Benjaminites who were at the rock of Gimon, and proclaimed peace to them. And Benjamin returned at that time, and they gave the women whom they had saved alive from Jabesh Gilead that day did not suffice for them. And the people had compassion on Benjamin, because the Lord had made a breach in the tribes of Israel. Then the elders of the congregation said, "What shall we do for wives, for those who are left, since the women are destroyed out of Benjamin?" And they said, "There must be an inheritance for the survivors of Benjamin, that the tribe be not blotted out from Israel. Yet we cannot give them wives of our daughters, for the people of Israel had sworn, cursed be he who gives a wife to Benjamin." So they said, "Behold, there is the yearly feast of the Lord at Shiloh, which is north of Bethel, and east of the highway that had gone from Bethel to Shechem, and south of Laberna." And they commanded the Benjaminites, saying, "Go and be in wait at the vineyard, and watch. If the daughters of Shiloh come out and dance in the dances, then come out of the vineyard and seize each man his wife from the daughters of Shiloh, and go to the land of Benjamin. And when their fathers or their daughters come to complain to us, we will say to them, Grant them graciously to us, because we did not take for each man of them his wife in battle. Neither did you give them to them, else you would be guilty." And the Benjaminites did so, and took their wives according to their number from the dancers whom they carried off. Then they went and returned to their inheritance, and rebuilt the towns and dwelt in them. And the people of Israel departed from there in that time, every man to his tribe and family, and they went out from there, every man to his inheritance. In those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. This is not the kind of life that we envision now under God. When we look through the Old Testament, and particularly after the Israelites left Egypt, there was a lot of killing going on. There was a lot of blood. There was a lot of things that we don't associate with God. We today in the New Testament times think of God as peace and mercy and love and grace and forgiveness. And He is all of that. But there was a time that God's vengeance showed physically here on earth. Now, this story takes place, if you look at the 27th verse of the 20th chapter, the people of Israel inquired of the Lord For the ark of the covenant of God was there. That was in Bethel. The ark was in Bethel. In those days, Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, ministered before it in those days. Now, we have Aaron, the brother of Moses, who worked with Moses in getting the Israelites out of Egypt and became the first high priest, and the Levitical priesthood came through the lineage of Aaron. That's the Aaron we're talking about. So his grandson was ministering to the Ark of the Covenant when this story took place. The Ark of the Covenant, if you remember, was the presence of God, and the Ark of the Covenant was carried before the army as it went into battle, and continued to do so and showed God's presence. So we have Aaron, first high priest, and we find in Numbers 33, I believe, Aaron's death, and it says that he died at 110 years old. He died up on the mountain, not going into the land of promise. He and Moses were neither one allowed to enter the land of promise because they had disobeyed God. If you remember, 600,000 men left Egypt, and only 2, Joshua and Caleb, were allowed to go into the promised land. So they wandered around for 40 years waiting for all these 599,998 men to die. And Moses and Aaron were 2 of those that had to die. Remember, God took Moses up on the mountain, let him look into the promised land, but he told him, you can't go in there. And Moses died on the mountain, and God took Moses and buried him. And they didn't know where Moses was buried. Still don't know where Moses was buried. God took care of that. Aaron also died. So now we have Aaron dying before they go into the land of Canaan. Time frames. The law of Moses was about 1,500 years. It was given 40 years, or it was given right after they left Egypt. And then they wandered around for 40 years. So the Israelites entered in the land of Canaan 1460 BC-ish, somewhere around there. Phinehas, the grandson of Aaron, if you can find his lifespan was somewhere around 1440 to 1380, somewhere in that time frame. That sets this story maybe 50 years, 60 years after they had come into the land of Canaan. This is before the period of the judges. And that's why we don't see a judge leading this battle, leading this situation. If you remember in here, it says they went to Bethel. All of the congregation went to Bethel to talk to the Lord. Why'd they go there? That's where the Ark of the Covenant was. In their mind, that's where God was. Their mind was not that God was everywhere. The Israelites had a mentality of Yahweh, God. Yahweh in the box. That was their mentality. God in the box. And they carried that box with them everywhere so they would have God everywhere. So they went to Bethel. Now, the high priest was there at Bethel, taking care of the ark and taking care of the things he had to do. So this Levite comes and cuts his wife up. It's interesting, when we're told the story in the 19th chapter, she's called a concubine. But when the Levite recites the story in the 20th chapter, he calls him his calls her his wife. Well, in my mind, what's the difference between a concubine and a wife? In my mind, a concubine had always been a mistress. So I went to look this up, and I found out that no, the Hebrew word, that's not always the case. One of the definitions of a concubine is a mistress. One of the definitions is an unmarried woman living with the man as a wife. And then the third definition of that word is a man's second wife. Because back then, men quite often had more than one wife. So it would fit if this was his second or third or multiple wife. So when he said, I sent my wife, they came and killed my wife, there's not a conflict between the two stories. So we have this man and his wife go into town. She gets killed. He cuts her up and sends it out. And it's interesting, the reaction of the Israelites to these 12 pieces of body coming out to them. It says, then they all came together as one. 400,000 soldiers. That's what it means when it says men who drew the sword. They were soldiers. 400,000 soldiers came together and said, what's this all about? What are they asking? What's this all about, you sending these body parts out? We want to know what's going on. Must be something about here. When you think about 400,000 people, 400,000 soldiers, there's 100,000 people in Lewisville, so 4 times the Lewisville population, total population, were just the soldiers. That's a big army. Now they say, what's this all about? Which one of you thinks you have a strong enough voice to stand up in front of 400,000 people and answer that question? It always amazed me how Moses told 2 million people, let's get up and go. How to communicate? They didn't have cell phones, they didn't have megaphones, they didn't have loudspeakers. There had to be a communication, and I think we get an indication of this type of communication where it says they took 10 of every 100, 100 of every 1,000, 1,000 of every 10,000. In other words, in this story, they took 10% of those 400,000, sent them back to get supplies. Because these 400,000 men had not come to go to battle, they'd come to find out what was going on. So they sent 40,000. I think that gives me an indication of like our current army does the same thing. You have a squad, you have a platoon, you have a company, you have a division, you have an army. So they could talk to a small number, and then that would spread to another group, and that would spread to another group, and communication could happen. So these 400,000 said, what happened? And it relates to them. He says, well, we went over to Gibeah, and we were going to stay there, and they came and they wanted to kill me. That wasn't exactly the way the story went. But he said they wanted to kill me. And they killed my wife. You notice he didn't say, I sent her out of the house. Kind of interesting. Always taking care of ourselves when we tell our stories, aren't we? Yeah. But they killed her, and he said, then I cut her up and sent her out. Well, they didn't like that at all. They said, we've got to do something about this. So 400,000 soldiers getting their provisions, now they're going to go against Benjamin, one of the 12 tribes. Benjamin is one of the 12 tribes. Benjamin, as we saw, mustered 26,000 men and another 700 from the town of Gibeah. So 30,000 Benjaminites against 400,000 Israelites. But the Israelites asked God, who should we send first? who would go by lots. And he said, okay, send this group in first. So he just sent one group, one tribe. I've always wondered why the 400,000 didn't just go ahead and wipe the thing out. I think we may have an answer for that, but we'll come to that back in a minute, maybe. So this one tribe went against the Benjaminites. Benjaminites came up against them and came out and battled them. Now, when you vision this battle, you've probably seen a lot of movies that back in the old times, back in the dark ages, when they would have battles and they would have this long battle line out around a castle. That's the kind of battle this had. There was an army out there lined up. In your picture, over 26,000 men, because 26,000 of them are going to get killed. So 30,000 or so people lined up out there ready to go to battle. 26,000 Benjaminites came out to fight them. Now, this is not the kind of battle where you're flying at 40,000 feet and you send a smart bomb down and kill some people, or where you're staying 2 miles away and you take a howitzer and send a shell, an explosive shell 2 miles over there and blow some people up. This is the kind of battle that you're standing from here to here with the guy you're trying to kill. And he's trying to kill you. And did you catch in there where it said of these 26,000, they had 700 left-hand people? It's always interesting to me the details that God puts in these stories, and I wonder why. And he said these left-handed people were so accurate with a sling that they could hit a hair. That's pretty accurate. Now you understand how David hit Goliath. The sling was a weapon. So maybe some of the battle was from here to Fred. That's going to be about a sling's distance if you're going to kill somebody. Most of the battle was right here, and they talk about men who drew the sword. That's how the battle went. Bloody, gory, gruesome. You see the guy's head get cut off. You see his arm cut off. You see a stab in the leg and him wandering around. This is the kind of battle that they had. And the Benjaminites came out and slew this tribe, the army from this tribe. Well, end of the day. So the Israelites all went up to Bethel. This is the 400,000 less whatever's died. They go up to Bethel to ask God or talk to God about it. That's where the ark is, Yahweh in the box. So they went to Bethel to talk about this. And they said, is this really what you want us to do, God? You want us to do this again? God said, yep, go do it again. So they went back the next day. They sent some people up the next day. The Benjaminites came out. I don't know, it doesn't tell us how many Benjaminites, how many they lost in the battle. I don't envision them coming out without losing anybody. But anyway, the Benjaminites came back out the second day. They routed the Israelites again, and the Israelites fell back. End of second day. Now, all that was left of the 400,000 went up to Bethel again. Go back to talk to God and say, look, we've done this twice. You sure you want us to do this again? And God said, yes, I want you to go again. And this time, I will give you the victory. Did you notice that? I will give you the victory. So they said amongst themselves, I guess, we need a plan. I don't get the indication that God gave them this plan. I get the indication they formed this plan on their own. And this plan was, we'll send some up against them like we have before, but we're going to take 10,000 and go hide them up here. Now, there's still close to 400,000 people. Why didn't they just take the whole 400,000 and go do it? No, they're going to send some up. and we're going to go up and we're going to feint, and we're going to pull them out, and we're going to pull them away so these in ambush can go down and wipe out Gibeah. That was the purpose, to wipe out Gibeah. So they go up and set their battle lines up, and the Midianites come out to fight them, and they start falling back. Now, where they'd killed 26,000 one day and 18,000 the next day, now it says they killed 30. Did you catch that? They killed 30. Well, that's not even worth mentioning, God. So as they fell back, they killed 30. And after killing 30, the Benjaminites said, they're gone again. We won again. But they had moved far enough away from Gibeah that the 10,000 hiding out there came in and wiped out the city. Totally destroyed the city. Killed everybody in the city. And they had a signal lined up that when smoke came up out of the city, the army would turn around. They would know that Gibeah was taken. So they went in and took Gibeah, sent the smoke up. The Israel army saw the smoke signal. Did you get that smoke signal? The Indians using smoke signals. Did you all get that? You didn't get that. Never mind. So they saw the smoke signal, and they turned around and came back and went. Now we got the 400,000 or 300 and however many thousand left against the Midianites. They slaughtered the Midianites. They wiped them out. And the Midianites saw it was a problem, so they turned around and they said, there's the rock of Rimmon over there. We'll go over to the rock of Rimmon out in the wilderness, and we can take refuge there. So they turned around and started going toward the rock of Rimmon. The Israelites followed them, and they killed 5,000 on the road, and then they killed another 2,000, and only 600 Midianites ended up at the rock of Rimmon. So we have 600 Midianites at the rock of Rimmon. The army of Israel is intact. And I guess they're sitting around the bonfire talking, or the chiefs are talking, and they say, you know what? We're lacking a tribe. The tribe of Midian is gone. We need to do something about that. And so they said, okay, we can't give them, we said we won't give the Midianites a wife. So we can't give them a wife. They haven't won any wives in war, so that won't work. What we'll do is, which tribe, which group did not come into the 400,000? And they came up with the name of that group. And they said, okay, go in and kill all of them. All of them, all the men, all of the wives, all of the women who have lain with a man, all of the children, wipe them all out and save the virgins. So they went in and they did that. There were 400 virgins in that city, so they brought them back. They sent the 400 virgins to the rock of Rimmon to the 600 men there. That left them 200 short. So 400 of the men got wives. 200 still need wives, so they said, okay, we're going to have this opportunity for a party, dancing. And the tribe of Shiloh, the women of Shiloh, you 200 Benjaminites, you go out there in the vineyard and hide. And when these women of Shiloh, if they come out and dance, the dances, then you're welcome to come in and grab you a wife. So 200 of these Midianites went in and grabbed 200 of these dancers. I don't know how many dancers there were. But they got their wives and finished out the situation that way. Now, the Israelites saw that happen. They said, that's great. That works. We're fine. Let's go home. And they all went home. This was early on, before the Judges. Then we have the book of Judges that goes through the 13 judges, but this is not the end of the period of the Judges. So if you flip over 2 books to the 1 Samuel, We have, in the second chapter of 1 Samuel, the 11th verse, then Elkanah went home to Ramah, and the boy ministered to the Lord, and in the presence of Eli the priest. Now Eli the priest becomes the 14th judge over in the 4th chapter. The 18th verse. When he mentioned the ark of God, Eli fell over backward from his seat by the side of the gate, and his neck was broken, and he died, for he was an old man and heavy. He had judged Israel 40 years. Eli was a judge. Now, if you flip on over to the 7th chapter, 5th verse, begin there. Then Samuel said, "Gather all of Israel at Mizpah, and I will pray to the Lord for you." And they gathered at Mizpah and drew water and poured it out before the Lord, and fasted on that day, and said, "There we have sinned against the Lord." And Samuel judged the people of Israel at Mizpah. Samuel becomes the 15th judge. So we have Eli as a judge and Samuel as a judge. And then in chapter 8, starting with the first verse, when Samuel became old, he made his sons judges over Israel. The name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second was Abijah. And they were judges in Beersheba. Yet his sons did not walk in his ways, but turned aside after gain. They took bribes and perverted justice. This is the 16th and 17th judge. Now you might say, well, it says they were just judge over Beersheba, so they wouldn't be considered a judge, except that the first verse says Samuel made his son judges over Israel. So I tend to include them as judges. So that ends up with our 17 judges during the period of the judges. This was all happened over 300 plus years from after Joshua died. Joshua led the people, Joshua and Caleb led the people into the promised land. Joshua died, a time period went on, and that was when that story happened in that time period. Joshua wasn't there to lead them. A judge wasn't there to lead them. So that puts that story we saw today in that time period before the judges. And then the period of judges came up, and they came all the way down, and it's still in 1 Samuel 8, in the 4th verse, then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, "Behold, you are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now anoint for us a king to govern over all of us." Here they start asking for a king. God had said, "I am your king." Israel is now rejecting God as their king and saying, "We're tired of the judges. We need a king. Appoint for us a king." And to that I say, it's time to eat. Let's go. Thank you.